Hi guys, welcome to Love and Lust audiobooks channel, updated daily with great audiobooks. So please subscribe to me if you don't want to miss it.
Well, let's go to read this book. Seducing My Older Alpha Mate, chapter 26 to 30. Chapter 26, once and for all. Alice's father. The next morning, when I went to find Simon to talk with the Alpha King, he was not in his room. I had tried to go the night before on my own accord after Simon had randomly vanished, but I was unsuccessful. The Alpha King had already left his chamber. I asked a nearby guard about Simon's location, only to be told he had already left the palace for the day. Why did he leave so suddenly? I was angry at his sudden departure, but I couldn't do anything else. I stood in front of his room and waited for almost an hour. When I called him, I only got his voicemail. Soon after, I received a text. Alice, I have some things to deal with. I'll be back in the evening. I groaned. Fine. If he wanted it to be like this, then so be it. I gave up and walked angrily towards the kitchen. I knew Joan was there. I needed her comfort, although she didn't know anything. Seeing her made me feel better. As soon as I made eye contact with her, I let out my emotions. She pulled me instantly into a massive hug. Baby girl, who messed with you? Joan asked, cradling me. I'm just overwhelmed. I stated through broken words. It was true, I was, but not for reasons she thought. Joan backed out of the embrace, but kept her hands on my shoulders. I'm gonna guess it was because of Mr. Simon. She teased, and I blushed uncontrollably. It has nothing to do with him, I replied firmly, wiping my nose with my sleeve. I'm sure it doesn't. Joan answered with a raised eyebrow, but speaking or not speaking of him, she continued, I saw him last night. My eyes widened. What went? Joan speaking with Simon alone. What would ever prompt her to do such a thing? Joan looked at me with conviction in her eyes. Alice, did you ever read the books I gave you from your mother? The books? What are they? Joan grabbed my hand and led me out of the kitchen. Come with me, she whispered, and dragged me to her room, which was right across from mine. I blinked vigorously as I crossed the hall, trying to understand what was happening. Joan spoke with such urgency that it surprised me. After yesterday's events and my poor attempt at confronting the Alpha King alone, I had come back to my room to crash. The excitement from the evening had left me exhausted, but this whole encounter had woken me, and I was alert. Joan plopped me down on her bed and started rummaging through her items. I couldn't help my curiosity. Joan, what's going on? What did you go to Simon for? Suddenly, a small hard drive dropped onto my lap. My eyes widened. What is it? I asked as I turned it over in my hand. That hard drive was your mother's. Joan sat down next to me. What? I exclaimed, looking up into her eyes. What's on it? She instantly hushed me, reminding me to be quiet. Clearly, it was something valuable and important, something she didn't want others knowing about. She grabbed my hand and hurt. I think it is time that you were able to live the way you want. Joan's eyes glistened. That's all I want for you. I don't understand. I managed to sputter out despite my shock. You will, she stated with a smile, I promise. The room was silent as I took in her words. I know I have always pushed for you to stay with the Shifters, but I think you should consider what you want from life. But what about you? I asked quickly. And what about? I caught myself just in time, but Joan smiled as she realized what I was going to say. Simon, she finished for me, causing my cheeks to blush. You would have to ask him yourself, but I get the feeling that he would go with you. You think so? I couldn't help but ask. You guys are so young and naive. Joan rolled her eyes with a smile on her face. What about you, though? I asked again. Don't worry about me, Alice, Joan replied, giving me a tender and loving hug. I owe it to your mom to keep you safe. I hugged her back. She stood up and pulled me up as well. Now get back to your room and get ready. You have training soon, Joan said, practically pushing me out of the door and across the hall. Thank you, I whispered back before heading to my own room, closing the door and turning the lock. I went over to my bed and sat down, instantly plugging in the hard drive to my laptop instead of doing as I was instructed. I couldn't help it. I needed to know what was on here. The screen powered up and I clicked the icon to open up the external hard drive. An obnoxious alert popped up asking for the password. Shit. This was my mom's hard drive. What would the password be? I thought of asking Joan, but knew that if she had known, then she would have told me. I got out of bed and walked over to the secret bookcase so I could grab the books that once belonged to my mother as well. Maybe there was a clue in one of them. I looked at the words that were on the top of every single one of the books, tracing my fingers over them once more. To Alice, life is beautiful, precious, and worthy of awe. Looking at them now, I seem to understand them better. Every other time I looked at these words, I felt as if they were a slap in my face. A reminder of everything my life wasn't until I met Simon. Now I could see how life could be beautiful, like when he would tease me or when I would hear his laugh or when we had spent that beautiful night on the mountain. And I could see how life could be precious because I suddenly valued my own. I had never wanted to die, but it hadn't seemed like the worst thing in the world. But now I couldn't imagine dying or, heaven forbid, Simon dying. I couldn't believe I was thinking it, but life truly was worthy of awe when you had someone to share it with. It gave me a new respect for life that I didn't have before. That's it. I grabbed the laptop and attempted the first password, making sure I didn't mix up the letters. I slowly typed out respect life goes into the password box and pushed enter. The thinking circle disappeared on the screen and I held my breath. Maybe that was too simple for a password. Soon enough, an error popped up. Damn it, I knew that it was too easy. My fingers drummed on the bed as I tried to think of something, anything. I tried multiple passwords, but nothing worked. Everything failed. I fell back on my bed and groaned in frustration. I wasn't going to get anywhere at this rate. If I was to help Joan, I needed to find an answer sooner rather than later. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. I jumped from my bed and looked out the window. Shit, it was dark. I missed training. Alice, I heard Simon's voice call through the door. Slowly, I crept to the door and opened it. I rubbed my eyes with the back of my hand as he stared at me. Did you just wake up? He asked. No, I replied. Sorry, I didn't show for training. I just got sucked into something and I stopped speaking and felt my eyes light up. Maybe Simon could help me, actually. I'm happy you're here, I exclaimed. You are, he asked, a small smile forming on his lips. Yes, come here. I opened the door for him and walked back to my bed, where I picked up my laptop. Simon walked inside the room and shut the door behind him. A laptop? He asked as he walked toward me. No, the hard drive plugged into the laptop, silly. Joan gave me at this noon. It belonged to my mom. Joan said that when I open it, I will understand what I want from life. She was so mysterious that I felt that the things on this hard drive must be important to me. My eyes then flickered to his. Holy shit, he muttered, taking the laptop from my hands. He scrunched his face after reading the screen. Do you know the password? I sighed and rubbed my temples. I know, that's what I've been trying to find out. It has something to do with the inscription my mom left me in this book. I can't figure it out for the life of me. Simon set the laptop back down on my bed and grabbed the book instead, reading its words out loud to Alice. Life is beautiful, precious, and worthy of awe. His eyes then turned to me. What have you tried? Respect life, passionate, trust, you name it. I've tried it. I groaned. I have no idea. Simon looked pensive for just a moment and then spoke. Alice, do you still hate Shifter? Why would he just randomly ask me that? I raised my eyebrow. What is that? Just answer the question. I sighed. I know some are decent. I muttered, so not entirely. No. And what of your abilities do you still hate them? At this, I stopped. Did I hate my abilities still? I hadn't questioned it before. The answer used to be a resounding yes, but now I wasn't so sure. I used to, but now I see how they can give me strength. Then I looked at him and felt my smile grew. You taught me that. Simon bit his lip and I swore I saw the hint of a blush. My heart fluttered. Then he cleared his throat. All right, then last question, Alice. Do you love yourself? This caught me off guard. Love myself. He nodded. Animals, plants, microbes, those were wolves, humans, and us. We are all like. It doesn't matter what species we are or what we look like. It doesn't matter how we exist in this world. Aren't we beautiful, precious, and worthy of awe? Alice, what if life is love? My eyes widened. It was one I hadn't tried before. I quickly typed it in and hit enter. As we waited a few seconds with bated breath, and then I slowly turned the screen to him, my expression completely comprised of shock. It was right. Life is love. Hundreds of files appeared. Simon sat beside me on the bed and watched me click on the first folder. On the screen, a video of a pregnant woman in the woods appeared. Her hair was a mess and she was covered in mud. It was clear she was running from something or someone. I clicked play and it came to life. The woman cradled her stomach and addressed the camera. Hi, Alice. It's me, Mama. If you're watching this, I'm most likely gone. I'm so sorry to have left you, baby. I am so sorry for bringing you into this cruel world, but I needed you to know that no matter what, I love you. Life is beautiful, baby girl, and so precious. I wish I could have stopped the destruction the humans have caused, but no matter who you are and what you become, I hope you value your life and respect it for me. I hope you one day find a love as great as I have and seize it when it shows. You deserve more than the life given to you. And I hope you realize that before it's too late. I love you, sweetheart. Take care. And with that, the video ended. I didn't know what to think or do. I felt paralyzed. My mother, she was right there. She felt almost real. I tried to stop my emotions from showing in front of Simon. The last thing I needed was him to think of me as weaker than he already did. But he surprised me instead. He waited. I could feel his eyes on me, but not in a judgmental way. Rather like he was concerned for me. I wiped under my eyes to rid myself of the tears forming. Without speaking, Simon took the laptop and closed the video. I'd never say it, but I was thankful for him in that moment for not trying to push me to speak on my feelings, but rather giving me the space he knew I needed. I felt a nudge at my shoulder and lifted my gaze. Hey, Simon said, pointing to the screen. I noticed he had clicked open a different folder. Look at this. I looked down and saw a document opened on the screen containing real experimental data. My eyes grew in size and my tears seemed to stop automatically. I quickly sifted through it. The folder listed important information as well as the production method of gene fusion agents that allowed normal fusion of human genes and supernatural material genes. In addition to this, the hard drive also had some advanced biology textbooks to help whoever possessed it to understand these experiments and paranatural creatures. It was all here, everything. But for some reason, that wasn't what was on my mind. Rather, it was him leaving me last night when he promised to take me to the Alpha King. It had bugged me all night. If he left me, then would he eventually leave me later? My heart constricted at the thought. I looked up at him with what I knew was clear hurt in my eyes. Why did you leave last night? You promised you'd take me to the Alpha King. I had a call I had to take, Ellen, he clarified, but Yeah, we can talk about that another time. I have one last question for you. I didn't believe a word he said, but I nodded anyways. How would you feel if I had you trained to make medicine and antidotes and everything? That way we could perhaps use what's in here for good. I looked at him in confusion, but his gaze gave me the little assurance I needed at that time. I think I would like that. Simon grinned. Perfect. Let me make a quick call. I'll be right back. He left the room, and I was only left with more questions. Minutes later, he reappeared in the bedroom, clearly ecstatic over something, ready to go. He asked with a smile. I stared at him like I was looking at a two-headed goat. Why are you being so nice? I asked suddenly. I felt my cheeks turning a bright shade of pink. Soon enough, a portal appeared, and Simon smirked. Maybe I want something later, he answered with a wink. My eyes widened, and I looked to Simon in awe. You'll be fine, I promise, he stated softly. I nodded in agreement, and my body relaxed at his words and touch as he took a hold of my hand. What was happening? Where was he taking me? But there were no time for questions, because before I knew it, we stepped through the portal. Chapter 27, all about Simon. Alice's pub. My head felt dizzy as we dropped out of the portal. I probably would have fallen to my knees if it wasn't for Simon's warm arm, still wound tightly against me, supporting me. I looked up and blinked my eyes multiple times, trying to get rid of the dizziness. Simon stood still, allowing me time to adjust. I was thankful for that, not only now, but back in my room also. What I had seen of my mother shook me more than I thought, and I needed the distraction. The room came into view, and I felt like I was in what I had pictured as the human lab. There were bottles and beakers everywhere, with racks lining the walls filled with all sorts of ingredients. A table sat in the middle of the room, and sitting at it was a woman that looked oddly familiar to me. She was a bit older than me, or even Simon, but she was still beautiful. There was a wildness about her that I could sense and admire. I watched as she stood up and walked confidently towards me. Hello, Alice. I'm Sophia, a family friend of Simon's. She smiled and held out a hand to me. It is nice to formally meet you. Formally, I asked and glanced up to Simon, but he ignored my gaze. Had he been talking about me? Then it hit me, and I gasped. I slapped Simon's shoulder. I knew I wasn't dreaming. Simon chuckled. Okay, you're right. Now that introductions are out of the way, I guess I will leave you girls to it then, Simon stated and pulled his hand away from my body. What? I asked you just poof me here, portal, or whatever you call it, and now you are leaving. Divide and conquer, Simon said with a smile and shrugged. That's Simon for you, Sophia laughed and rolled her eyes, always on his own schedule. That one. She moved her hands quickly, and I watched as another portal appeared in front of Simon. Don't worry, you'll be fine, Simon whispered close to my ear. The sound of his voice and feeling of his breath sent a shiver through me. He then gave me one more smile before disappearing with the portal. Sophia turned to me and smiled. Shall we get started then? I cleared my throat. Yes, I straightened up and got my confidence in check. I am here to learn. We spent the majority of the night just learning basic chemical biology in the base. I was able to quickly grasp the theoretical knowledge in the books that my mother had given me, but now I was actually learning chemical reasoning. Sophia seemed impressed with how quickly I was picking up everything she taught me. At least she kept saying so. After realizing how adept I was with science, she thought it would be fun to dabble into the witchcraft side. Have you ever heard of divination? Sophia asked me, and I shook my head. Come sit down. We both sat at the table in the middle of the room. She held her hands out across from me, and I automatically knew that she was wanting me to place my hands on top of hers. I felt a small prick from both of my palms. Do you believe in fate? Sophia asked in a clear voice. No, I answered immediately. When Sophia looked at me, I explained. I have never believed in fate because the moon goddess never blessed me. Sophia closed her eyes for a moment and then reopened them. That is because your heart is resisting your fate, Sophia said slowly, and I felt my hands warm as she closed her eyes again. Your fate is to become a great leader in the future. And at the same time, you will fall in love with someone much older than yourself. Simon, I gasped, getting into the reading. Sophia opened her eyes and smiled at me. If you think it is him, then it is. No way, I wouldn't want someone that no one wanted, I said defensively, then got worried how she would react. I never felt that Simon was something that nobody wanted. I just wanted to protect myself. I panicked. Instead of getting angry, though, Sophia stayed calm. Why do you think that Simon is not liked? Sophia asked me in confusion. He was lonely when he came to my pack and traveled to this country alone. I paused. I know about him and his sister-in-law as well, how she didn't want him. Sophia looked at me, considering me before she responded. Simon is the alpha prince in his home country and has had many suitors. My jaw dropped open, but Sophia kept talking. Simon was much more arrogant in his youth, and the only person who had ever moved his heart was his sister-in-law. However, when his older brother and his sister-in-law matted, he had no control over the matter, and he chose to leave. Simon is by no means unwanted. On the contrary, he is very sought after. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Simon a prince? Sophia smiled gently. The hardest thing for him is to give others a chance to get close to him. And the more time he has spent on his own in this new country, the more mature and indifferent he has grown. That's why I was excited to finally meet you. You are the first person he has allowed to get close in years. How well do you know Simon? I managed to choke out. I hadn't known any of that about Simon. I have known him since he was born. Sophia beamed. I am like family. Can you tell me more? I asked, desperate for any information she could give me. Simon was always so reserved and quiet that it would probably take me years to find out anything else. How about we play a game? Sophia asked. If you win, I will answer a question about Simon. But if you lose, you have to answer a question from me. Deal, I smiled. What game? How about rock, paper, scissors, as Sophia asked. Nice, quick game with a fair chance to us both. I nodded and we got our hands ready. We shot on 3 and I was happy to see that I won. What was Simon like as a kid? I asked. Of the 3 children, Simon was the most rebellious. Sophia laughed. Later, Simon even came to live with his uncle and myself. She held out her hand again and we played another round. This time I lost. Do you like Simon? Sophia asked bluntly, causing me to choke and cough. I felt my cheeks flushing. She obviously thought I did already. So what would be the difference if I said it? Saying it out loud seemed crazy. I think he is a great teacher. Oh, Alice, that's not what I mean. And you know it, Simon chuckled. Oh, I paused and took a breath, to be honest. I don't even really know what it looks like to care for someone like that. I haven't had a lot of love in my short life. Sophia stared at me contemplatively. I will accept that answer. Let's go again. We continued like that for a few more rounds, each answering a fair amount of questions. Slowly, I pieced together Simon's past, his family dynamics, how he was tricked, why he acted mature. Now it all started to make sense. I was surprised how Simon had managed to stay so childish after the tribulations that he faced. I was also surprised to learn of the many vicious things that he had done, particularly while being manipulated. But I felt as if I had a much better understanding of his feelings for his family. The current Simon that I knew seemed almost completely different from the boy that Sophia was telling me about. I found myself feeling glad that he was older, that he had more time to recover, especially before he met me. I couldn't help but be amazed. Simon was beyond anything I ever imagined, and the more I thought on it, the more I could see myself falling deeper than I originally planned. A hissing sound resounded through the lab, and Simon appeared through a portal behind Sophia. He groaned once he realized where he stood. "Sophia, you were supposed to make me pop up behind Alice so that I could scare her." He scolded her. My mouth dropped open in surprise. "Wait, you were in on this?" "Yeah," Sophia laughed. "He texted me a little bit ago and asked for a portal." "But you ruined it," he muttered. "Oh, calm down," said I, teased. I instantly covered my mouth to stifle my laughter, and Simon looked to Sophia, completely astounded. "You didn't," he warned. "And that concludes our lesson for today," Sophia replied, standing. "It was great to meet you, Alice." She gave me a small nod and then vanished. I looked at her and laughed. "Don't be mad at little Sit-Sit," I taunted, emphasizing his nickname even more. Simon frowned as he walked up to me. "I am neither little nor big, and you are not allowed to call me that," he said sternly. "What do you want me to call you then?" I teased. "Teacher, Mr. Simon." Without warning, Simon grabbed my hand and pulled me up, then took my spot on the chair. Just as I was about to object, he grabbed my hips and sat me down on his lap. I immediately stopped talking and could hear my heart beating in my chest. Simon leaned his head in close and made sure I could feel his breath against my ear. "Simon," he whispered. "It's okay to call me Simon." I swallowed audibly. "Simon," I repeated his name breathlessly. "Do you like me?" He stiffened almost imperceptibly for just a moment before he leaned back into my ear and nipped at the earlobe. I let out a gasp. "You will have to find the answer to that question yourself." He teased. "I can't tell you." "Is there a reward for answering correctly?" I boldly asked as I leaned back to look at his face. The longer I sat on his lap, the more confident I was getting. "Goddess help me." His eyes darkened and his words came out more like a growl. "Yes." I stared at him in surprise. This was the most playful I had seen him in a long time. It was reminding me of the time he had pressed me against the tree. Remembering that made me flush all over. I looked down at my lips. Suddenly, I felt a hand connect directly with my ass. Smack. I sat up in surprise and swore my jaw couldn't get any wider as I stared at him in surprise. A huge grin spread across Simon's face. "Don't ever call me that nickname ever again," he purred. I could feel the desire stirring inside of me. As a good teacher, I have to make sure I dole out the punishments as well as their rewards. "Well, you are a great teacher," I murmured, getting closer to his lips. Then I paused. "So." Simon looked down at my lips. Was he going to kiss me? I breathed in deeply, waiting for the moment. It was so close until he pulled away. "We should get going," he said suddenly. Standing from the seat, I jumped off his lap, angered at the temptation, and it only flared more once I saw the look on his face. It was void of expression and back to its presentable self. "I'll have Sophia portal it." Simon reached for his phone and texted a number on it. "Will I be coming back here?" I asked meekly. I hoped so. I had really enjoyed my time with Sophia. Simon turned to me and gave a soft smile. Soon he replied. And with that, the portal appeared and we returned to the palace. Chapter 28. The Truth Revealed. Simon's paw previously. When I initially left Alice with Sophia, I knew she would be safe. If I trusted anyone to keep her under control and out of harm's way, it was Sophia. But at the time, I wasn't worried about that. I was more worried about what I had seen on the hard drive after Alice watched the video of her mother. It shook her. That was easy enough to see. But what I wasn't expecting to find when I took the laptop and closed the video out was another folder labeled Creator. I couldn't help myself. I clicked it open,
Scrolling through the files, even from a quick glance, it was easy to see what they were about. Alice and her mother's legacy at the lab. And more importantly, her father.
Didn't tell her because she didn't need to know. Of course, it concerned her. It was her past, after all.
But I needed to protect her and shield her from this ugly mess. She didn't deserve any more pain, and judging from her reaction to her mother's video, I had made the right call. The portal dropped me back into Alice's room, and I was glad to see that the laptop was still open and logged in. I walked over to the bed and picked it up, clicking on the file that had intrigued me earlier. I soaked in all of the information I could. By the end of it, I felt like I knew everything. From what I learned, Alice's mom had gone to the human lab as a young woman, excited about learning more about shifters. She had done research on them and examined the samples that the lab provided her with. From there, she attempted to create a formula to give to humans, giving them the same abilities as shifters. She had done it with the intention of helping the human race with shifter healing powers and strength. She was hoping to discover a way to defeat human illnesses that had no foreseeable cure. It wasn't until she met Alice's father that she realized that the human lab was abducting people and shifters against their will to experiment on them. The feelings she began to develop for Alice's father made her feel guilty about her involvement with the lab. And on top of learning that the laboratory was applying the gene to militant officials to create shifter armies, she decided that they must be stopped. But then she discovered she was pregnant. She watched as Alice's father died and knew that she had to get out of there to protect their child. The files I was staring at still held her initial plans for shutting down the lab. This was perfect. Everything I needed to take down the lab, it was all here. I stuck the flash drive Sophia slipped me into the laptop and copied the contents onto it before deleting any trace of the files off Alice's computer. I know Alice's mom had put it in there, hoping that one day Alice could save the humans who were used as experiments by the lab and the mutated rogues like her father. I didn't have a problem with Alice finding a way to help them, but I didn't want her to be the one to have to take the final blow. If Alice knew the truth, she might attempt to destroy the lab as well, and I couldn't have that. The idea of her going and getting hurt made me physically nauseous. I would destroy it by myself. Best case scenario, I succeed in destroying the lab. I confess my feelings to Alice, and we leave the palace to go into seclusion in the human world. Then another thought hit me. What if I didn't return? I couldn't risk confessing my feelings to Alice if I did not make it. She had already been through enough, but I still needed to find a way to protect her. Even if I wasn't here, Sophia could take her to safety. I would convince her to take Alice back to the United States to live with my brother and sister-in-law. They were good people, and they would take care of her if I couldn't. Hopefully it didn't come to that, though. I quickly dialed Alan's number. I needed to find out how much he had discovered since we last spoke. Maybe it could help me further and fill in any gaps I might be missing. Simon, straight to the point, as always. Alan, I replied, "You'll never believe what I'm holding right now." I told him about the flash drive and what the Alpha King had told me. He let out a long breath. Wow, he said I could picture him running a hand through his hair. That's a lot. Alice won't like that idea, being bait. I huffed. Trust me, I know, which is why I'm not telling her about any of it. She's not going to be used like cattle for slaughter. Not anymore. I yelled to expel my growing frustration at the thought. What have you found out about the babe? I know the exact location and the size of the land surrounding it, Alan said clearly, but quietly. They keep some human guards outside to keep watch, but no mutes in.
I am sure that the madness that the mutated rogues develop makes them too unstable or too unreliable to be guards. I thought out loud, are the humans armed?
Yes, Ellen confirmed. Good to know. Have you seen any sign of any prisoners, any of the members that were taken? No, nothing. All right, keep an eye on them still and let me know of any activity that you see. I paused. We will find your people and save them, if possible. Be prepared. I feel like we are getting close to making a plan to eliminate them.
Will do.
Thank you.
And then he hung up. Working with Alan was always so simple. I wish everything else in my life was too.
I texted Sophia to bring me back.
I slipped the flash drive into my pocket just as the portal appeared. Satisfied with the information I found and with my plan, I stepped back through to the other side.
Olivia's pop. It'd been almost an entire day, and the words that Alice had said on the other side of the wall would not leave my head. I suddenly found myself wondering about my mother's death when I was a young child. She was attacked by rogues outside the palace. Now I had a feeling that there was more to it. Maybe it was a mutated rogue that had killed her. I decided to go to James' room to ask him about our mother. When he had no response, I went to my father's office. He wasn't happy with me lately for failing to find information on Mr. Simon, but I was still his little girl and could hopefully get away with finding out more about my mother's death. I took a deep breath before knocking and entering. Olivia, my father greeted me as I walked through the door. His eyes didn't move from the paper in his hand. What brings you here? I had some questions about Mother's death that I hope you can help me with. He always liked when I got straight to the point. That's who I learned it from.
He stopped, and his eyes came to focus completely on me. What do you need to know about her death? That I haven't told you countless times. I couldn't tell if he was angry or just annoyed.
Well, I just found out that Alice was there that day.
He was much harsher with me than normal. Maybe he even knew Alice had something to do with it.
He sighed and set down whatever he was working on. We've been over this 100 times, Olivia. I know, I started, but I'd like to hear it again.
I'm my father. After your mother took Alice out, a small group of rogues descended on Alice, and your mother was already dead before I had gotten there. Is that good enough for you?
Rogues, I asked. Which rogue? Damn it, rogues are rogues. Olivia, what else do you want me to say? Ah, he yelled. He was definitely angry. Now get out. I have work to do. If anything, his attitude confirmed for me that Alice was responsible for my mother's death. I clenched my jaw and walked out of the office. I stormed out of the palace and was so involved in my thoughts that I didn't notice William until I ran right into him. Geez, Olivia, what's the hurry? William asked as he caught himself from stumbling down the step. Sorry, William, I'm on a mission, I said and tried to walk away, but he grabbed me by the arm. Wait, what's the matter? He asked. What's going on? Oh, nothing. I sneered at him, ripping my arm out of his grasp. Just pretty sure that the bitch you think is your mate was the one that got my mom killed, and I'm going to prove it. I stomped away from him, but William quickly caught back up and walked beside me. Why do you think that he quickly asked, and how exactly do you think that you are going to be able to prove it? Because that salty piece of garbage pretty much insinuated that she did it when we were attacked the other day. And she made a comment about how my mother died at the hands of the mutated rogues. I kept walking, not letting him slow me down at all. So if I track the mutant tracks, maybe I could discover where they lead and prove that Alice is aligned with them. Olivia, that's a bit of a stretch. William tried to grab me again, but I evaded him. Maybe we should go back inside and just think about this for a minute. And when they attacked the other day that they instantly killed or attacked every wolf, they even put her in a cage at one point. Even if she isn't aligned with them, then there is something going on. And I am going to get to the bottom of it. William sighed and sped back up to match my pace. At least let me come with you then, William offered. I don't like the idea of you going out there by yourself. Right, fine, I said with a shrug. I didn't really care what he did as long as he didn't stop me. We reached the gates and I paused for a moment. Was this really the smartest thing to do? But then I remembered everyone cheering when Alice had defeated me, and I let out a growl as I started forward. William followed as I walked up to the place of the attack. I could still see the faint traces of the one vehicle that had been brought and decided that following those tracks would be even easier. I'm going to follow these, I said to William, making sure he realized that it wasn't a question. With a nod of his head, he followed again as we started down the path. We were going to find out the truth of my mother's death come hell or high water, and I would make sure that Alice would pay. We continued away down until I heard distant voices. I put my arm out, stopping William in his tracks, and put my finger to my lips. William nodded, and we crouched down to remain unseen. What do you mean you didn't catch her? A rustic feminine voice snarled. We almost had her, but she broke free. We tried our best, Victoria, a man replied. He wasn't pleading. It was more like he was speaking to a comrade or someone of his same rank. Well, clearly it wasn't good enough, she sneered. I saw faint movement behind the trees ahead of Victoria as they called her. Paced back and forth. From what I could see, she was a tall, slender build with jet black hair. She wore a sort of coat over her, not an outdoor one, though. It looked like a lab coat. Come on, Victoria, cut us some slack here. My men are trained for combat, not deformed creature fight. She stopped right in front of a man dressed in army-designed gear. I recognized their clothing. They were the humans from before. She is not deformed, Victoria snapped. She was inches from his face, which remained stoic in her presence. This was a rare opportunity. Alice hasn't been out of the palace for over a decade. Who knows when this chance will come again? The man looked down at her. It will. Victoria, we haven't given up on our surveillance. We will watch her, and when we see the moment, we'll take it. However, that palace teacher seems to be the main problem here. At this, Victoria took a step back. How so? Well, from what I heard from my men, he is training her. Her skills have increased immensely. I suggest if we're to capture her, we'll need more shifters at our aid. Fight fire with fire. Victoria paused as if she were considering his words. Then she spoke. Okay, I'll get you some. Alice has special genes and is the most outstanding creation I have ever witnessed. She's different than the others. We need her. She paused, and I noticed her side profile contort slightly. Why did Alice come out in the first place? The man adjusted his stance. It seems the Alpha King's daughter wanted to teach her a lesson. From what I know, there is no love lost there whatsoever. You had that right? Victoria sighed and rubbed her forehead. She probably found out about the reasoning behind the Queen's death. This is messier than I thought. The Queen? The man asked, clearly confused. Victoria huffed. Years ago, the Alpha King's wife took Alice out of the palace grounds in a futile attempt to kill her herself. The Queen had no idea of our deal with the Alpha King, but we didn't miss the opportunity to capture Alice. We released the first group of mutated wolves. We almost had Alice, but what no one expected was for the Alpha King to rush back suddenly. The treacherous bastard, she snarled. He was trying to get his uncle free. The one we have in captivity. But Mike was and still is the only alpha shifter we have had until we get another younger, more powerful alpha to take his place and contribute to the experiments. We can't let him go.
It was silent for a moment. Then the man replied, "Do we need to worry about Alice then? What if the Alpha King's daughter wants to kill her?"
No, Victoria stated, she isn't our main concern. Alice doesn't have a wolf. It's something we haven't quite figured out to manage yet. None of the shifters we've created have a wolf, often leading them to go crazy. But Alice, for some reason, never did. She glanced in our direction, and I ducked lower ship had she seen us. Victoria, the man asked, his hand on his weapon at the ready. What's wrong? Her gaze turned away, and she shook her head. Nothing. Stand down. Surround the palace with shifters. We should be able to catch her soon. And with that, they broke off, but not without one last look from Victoria into the bushes. Once they were gone, William and I stood. I felt the anger boiling inside of me. Gallus is the reason my mother's dead. She is the reason for all of this. I sneered. When William didn't reply, I looked at him for backup, only to see him shaking and staring blankly at where Victoria was standing not long before. William. His eyes flicked to mine, but they were not focused. Oh, yeah, I heard that too. It's horrible. Look, I really need to go. I just remembered I have a meeting with James. Why don't you come back with me?
I thought about it for a moment. I really wanted to find out more, but William was right. I couldn't look into this more if I was caught. I nodded.
All right, but don't you dare tell James when you see him. I'm handling this on my own. I'm going to kill Alice for my mother and let her die slowly and painfully in a most desperate state. Chapter 29, I'm like, Alice's Paul. The next day, I climbed out of bed and threw my long hair up into a ponytail before heading out of my room. I was planning to go to Simon's to see if he would take me back to Sophia's. I really enjoyed my time with her, and she knew a lot about not only magic and potion creation, but also Simon. Maybe she could tell me something that I could use to my advantage at some point. However, halfway there, I was surprised to be interrupted by William walking into my path. He purposely cut me off and brought me to a stop. Hey, Alice, he said breathlessly. He must have been running. Hey, William, I countered, trying to sidestep him and continue on my way. He stepped back in front of me. Are you on your way to Mr. Simon's? He asked. I looked at him for the first time. His eyes were wide and refused to remain steady as he had just come to a groundbreaking revelation. So what if I am? I asked as I folded my arms across my chest. What I did certainly wasn't his or anyone else's business. He looked concerned. He paused and then suddenly blurted out, "What is your relationship with Mr. Simon?" Well, way overstepping that. What does that have to do with you? I questioned rather abrasively, like I was honestly going to tell him about my private life. Well, we are mates. William replied and smiled quickly. Aside, no offense, William, but that is just wishful thinking on your part. I don't even have a wolf. I can't mate. And you know what? I started to walk away again, but William stopped me once more. And at this point, I think you're just trying to make me angry. Move. He looked nervous, but he didn't stand down. William's eyes dodged around as he tried to search for words. I stepped forward, not wanting him to have more time to think, and put my hand on my hip in a basic pose. I gestured to myself as he stared at me. Is this what you like? I asked. My beauty? No, William snorted, and I watched as his cheeks reddened. Then why do you like me? I continued to ask. Goddess knows we have nothing in common. He turned his head away from me and didn't answer this time. I sighed. If you are looking for a daughter of the Alpha King, then you are looking in the wrong place. Go get Olivia, if that's what you want. She's the true princess. William remained still and listened to me, but showed no surprise or emotion when I said my word. He was used to my and Olivia's disgust for one another and probably didn't think anything of it yet. For some reason, he refused to leave. I needed to try to get a rise out of him, and I knew exactly how. Sigh. Like batted my eyelashes, it was game on.
Do you want to mark me? I asked seductively, walking closer to him so that we were only a breath away from each other. I've always been curious about what it would be like.
At this, I got part of the reaction I was looking for. William began to cough and stepped back away from me, slightly as he tried to quit choking. It sounded like he had swallowed too quickly. Satisfied that I had disarmed him, I stepped around him and began to walk away. But once again, I was stopped by his hand on my arm. I sighed as I turned back around to see him red-faced but breathing normally. His eyes had that confused and frightened look again, and he said something I never would have affected. Alice, we're the same. I turned around slowly.
We're the same, he repeated, but slower. No way, William wasn't a mutated shifter.
I would have known that. I pulled my arm from his hold once again. Nice try, William. I'll give you credit there. Now, leave me alone. I have other things to deal with. Just as I was about to turn around and head off, I heard a scratching noise behind me. I turned around just in time to see a large wolf with sandy brown fur standing in William's plate. Unable to help myself, I curiously walked towards the wolf to investigate him further. The more I looked at him, the more similarities I saw with William. Oh, goddess, it was him. It was William. Suddenly the wolf spoke. We are the same, it said once again. But it wasn't through my mind, it was through its mouth. I gasped and jumped back. How was that possible? I didn't think anybody could speak well in wolf form, but here he was. And those were clearly words. What in the fuck? I exclaimed. William quickly shifted back and attempted to cover my mouth. My heart was beating so fast, I thought it'd erupt. Please quiet down before you draw attention, William whispered in a frantic voice. I shut my mouth and nodded my head to signal to him that I understood. William dropped his hand. He stepped closer so that I could hear him better, but didn't try to touch me again, which I appreciated. I watched as he nervously brought his hand up and shook it through his hair. He was nervous, but what for? I have never felt my wolf, he began quietly. I raised my eyebrows but kept my mouth shut, despite the millions of questions I have. Although I can change into my shifter form and fight, I can't communicate with my inner wolf. I don't have the sense of anything else there. It's just silent. I stayed still and quiet. What was I hearing? William didn't have a wolf soul? Could this be possible? I waited for him to continue. This secret has haunted me for a long time, and I have worked my hardest not to let people discover it. That's why I try to excel in everything I do, including skill and strength. William was actually staring straight into my eyes and not looking around like normal. It made me feel as if he was actually telling the truth. But by the age of 18, wolves are able to find their mate. William continued. And because I do not have a wolf soul, I haven't been able to find a mate either. That's where you come in. I couldn't help but ask, breaking my silence. Yes, you said it yourself. Since you don't have a wolf soul either, you will never be able to find a mate, William explained. So if you help me keep my secret by becoming my mate, because then I can help convince people that you do have a wolf soul, it would be a win-win for both of us. Plus then we would have each other. I simply stared at him, shocked by what he was suggesting. He seemed to take my silence as needing more persuasion. Plus, he hurried, if you agree to be my mate, then I will take you out of this palace forever and take you to the Opal Moon Path. I could give you a much better position there and you could be happy, even happier than with Mr. Simon. Man, the shock did not quit coming with this kid today. I opened my mouth about to tell him off for saying anything about Simon, but he got to it first. I know you think you like him, but he can't be trusted.
Alice, William urged. His origin is unknown, which makes him not trustworthy. He might not be loyal to us.
Big words coming from a guy who just admitted that he was lying his whole entire life.
All I ask is that you think about it. William continued after the awkward silence that emanated in the space while I thought about it. I truly think it would be the best thing for both of us.
He turned to finally leave me, but this time I found myself halting him. Why did you tell me all of this? I asked quickly. Why would you tell me such a huge secret? Aren't you afraid that I could tell someone? Why do you trust me? William stopped laughed and turned slightly so that he could look at me.
You are not evil, Alice, he said with a soft smile. You equally hate everything around you. And since James and Olivia are still alive, I don't have to worry too much because you don't hate me. Do you?
I stared at him in silence, and he turned around and slowly walked away. As soon as he was gone, I stomped my foot in anger and watched as a shadow seemed to surround me. Instead of flinching or naturally jumping away, as my body asked for, I simply looked up and found the eyes that I was dreaming about. Simon was standing right behind me, and it looked like he had a serious set on his face. Had he heard what William and I were talking about?
Hello, Alice. What are you doing here? Simon asked in his silky, controlled voice. Were you coming to greet me?
The smile on his face made me relax. He hadn't seemed to notice or hear anything that had been said with William. In some ways, I was kind of sad. It would have been nice to see if he would get jealous. But then I remembered why I was on my way to his place and whipped around to smack him on the shoulder. His eyes widened in surprise at my actions, but the smile didn't leave his face.
Where have you been? I practically hissed at him.
I was wandering around his place at different times during the day just to attempt and find him after he had blown me off. I honestly didn't know what he was up to, and it was killing me. This was the first time that I had actually seen him. I've been busy, he said seriously. So were you waiting for me like a good student? No, I tried not to blush and looked away from him. I was just out for a walk. It had nothing to do with you. Simon suddenly sniffed the air, and I looked up at him to see his brow furrow as he glanced around and then looked down at me. Was William here just now? He asked without hesitation. With you. Crap, maybe I would get to see if Simon gets jealous after all. However, he didn't really seem to be the type. I thought about denying it for a split second just to avoid the drama. But I knew that I didn't want to lie to him. Yes, he just left, I said, watching him gauge his reaction. His eyes narrowed, and he was obviously upset. It mostly looked like he was annoyed, but I couldn't tell for sure. Don't get too close to William, Simon noted, and his voice did not sound as silky or as controlled as it had just mere moments earlier. The opal moon pack would not be suitable for you. Not suitable for me. What did he mean by that? Why, I asked, simply trying to keep the annoyance out of my voice. 2 boys tried to tell me what was best for me all in one day was really starting to rub me the wrong way. Didn't you always want to leave the palace and go to the human world? He asked. What happened to that? I paused before answering as I looked up into Simon's eyes. His eyes deepened as we stared at each other. He was right. I had always wanted to go to the human world, but things had changed. I had changed, even if it was slightly. I bit my lip. And Simon sighed. If that's still the case, I wouldn't get too deeply involved with the shifters. Simon added it would be to your benefit to stay away from them. Why did he tell me that he was a shifter? Was he telling me that I shouldn't get involved with him? I felt my heart almost constrict as I thought about it. How do you envision living in the human world? Simon asked. breaking my thoughts.
Once again, I was speechless. I had never actually thought about what life would entail outside of these walls. I had just known that it would be better than this.
I know you haven't thought about it, Simon continued once again, but there is still time to do so. When you've got an answer, come and tell me. I opened my mouth to ask him more questions. What did he know of the human world? Did he think I would manage there? But then I noticed that Simon was beginning to shift back and forth and was glancing behind me. He looked antsy. Was he in a hurry?
Before I could stop myself, I reached out and pulled on Simon's sleeve, pulling him slightly closer to me and holding him there. Simon stopped fidgeting and looked down at me in surprise.
Are you leaving the palace? I asked. I was almost embarrassed by how soft my voice came out.
Simon took a moment to reach down and tuck a loose strand of my hair behind my ear, making me shiver. But then he answered me, "Yes." My heart sank even further, and I dropped my eyes from him, knowing that they would show my disappointment. I knew that if Simon returned to his original country, that I would never be able to find him again.
I felt like I was cracking on the inside and realized that I had become much more dependent on Simon than I had ever expected.
However, I also knew that there was no way I could tell him how much I needed him. I straightened my back and raised my head, proudly hiding the hurt that lay underneath. Good, because even if I wanted to go to the human world, I would go by myself and not bother you. And with that, I turned and walked away. Chapter 20, Catching Out, Simon's Paw. I watched as Alice walked away from me, but I couldn't help the smile that spread across my lips.
Her stubbornness was still a cause of humor for me. Plus, making her angry was also my plan.
I needed to distance her from what would happen, at least tonight. She would be so angry that she didn't want to see me. She didn't even notice that she was showing her emotions in front of me more and more. I was grateful for it. There was a slight breeze by my side, and I looked to see as Sophia appeared. She had her eyes in front of her and just happened to catch the tail end of Alice walking away. You are working hard to prepare so much, but Alice still does not appreciate it. She seemed confused. Is she a lost cause? My smile faded to a completely serious frown as I dedicated my attention to her. I am no longer that impulsive boy that I was back then. I told Sophia what I have now is patience in emotional matters. Are you sure you want to destroy the laboratory? Sophia verified. Alan figured out where the lab is and where its weakest defense point is. It has a 70% chance of success. I explained, knowing that I was avoiding the main question. What if something happens to you? Sophia continued, nailing the exact part I was worried about. Would I just tell Alice nothing about it? I knew that the laboratory must be destroyed if Alice was ever to have a normal life. But the idea of something happening to me so that I wasn't able to rescue her from this hellhole was almost unbearable. I took a deep breath and reminded myself of the plan. That's why there was a backup plan. Speaking of that, I said, and laid on the sweet voice that I had always used as a kid when I wanted something. I was hoping that you would do me a favor with that and help me out. Just tell me what it is first, and then I'll decide. Sophia knew all of my old tricks and wasn't falling for them. If I don't show up at the scheduled time, would you please take Alice away to the human world for her safety? I asked, just wait until I get back, because I will definitely return. Sophia's eyes widened as she stood there in contemplation. I had never seen her look at me in such confusion as she was now. However, I didn't want to press the issue and waited for her to think it out herself. You really are helpless, she finally said, and I couldn't help but smile, self-deprecatingly. What little enthusiasm I have left in this world was given to that fierce girl. I let out a sad laugh.
I'm still hoping that she won't let me down.
Don't worry, that girl is not so obedient. She will definitely come to you, Sophia, comforted me, and then sighed. And I swear that I will do anything in my power to keep her safe as well, even if that means taking her away with me into the human world where I can hide her. Thank you, Sophia. I let out a breath of gratitude, and if the human world cannot keep her safe, then perhaps my brother and sister-in-law may even be willing to help. I was unsure since it had been so many years since I had seen them. But Sophia easily put my worries to rest. Of course they would help. She placed her hand on my shoulder and squeezed, especially when they understand who this girl is and how she means so much to you. He is your brother, and he will respect your wishes. I glanced at Sophia and then quickly glanced away. The emotions that were going through me at her words were almost causing an overflow. I had to remember when all of this was said and done that I needed to return home and bury my pride. Everything I felt for my brother and sister-in-law needed to be put to rest. And with Alice by my side, I was sure I could handle it. I glanced back in the direction she had walked away and seriously contemplated the odds of surviving and the odds of being with her. I was very confident, but that didn't mean I was perfect. And I still didn't like the fact that William was talking to her. I knew that he thought they were mates, and while she hadn't shown any interest, I didn't want him to persuade her to leave with him before I got my shot. I snorted out and set my attention back on Sophia. Okay, now that Alice's backup plan is set and sorted, let's get to her. And with that, I followed Sophia through a nearby portal. Alice's portal. I stood in the training area trying to work out some of the frustration that I had built up over Simon. The sweat was already pouring off of me as I ran drills and sparred with whoever was willing to face me. He was leaving, and he wouldn't tell me what he was doing. In some ways, I wondered if he was simply protecting me, but in typical fashion, I thought the worst scenario first, which was that Simon was getting tired of this country and tired of me and was returning home. I punched the guard in front of me extra hard in the chest and was impressed when he stumbled back slightly. At least I was still getting better at combat, even if I wasn't getting better at expressing my true emotions. "Hey, skanky piece of garbage," I heard someone's voice screech as it got closer. There was only one voice that could be that annoying. Sure enough, I turned around to see Olivia striding her way across the training field and up to me. I noticed that she looked much more confident in front of me than she had in weeks. Maybe it's because she had an audience like normal. I didn't even bother to answer her as usual, and as expected, this irritated her even more. However, I watched her try to hold it back as she stopped in front of me. Even though she looked like she was constipated, she didn't end up saying anything. After a few minutes, I realized that she wasn't going to talk until I did, ignoring her once again. I turned back to the guard in front of me to see if he was ready for another attack. Olivia proceeded to clear her throat next to me, cutting into my concentration. After about the fourth or fifth time that she did it, I finally gave in. Okay, I yelled out in frustration. "Did you need something?" Olivia smiled at having won. "Mr. Simon sent me to get you," she smiled, "but it wasn't a true one." "I'm supposed to take you to his place. Apparently, he wants to talk about the attack the other day. Again." "Simon," I asked. Our conversation replayed in my mind. He was leaving without me, and it fueled my anger even more. I scoffed. "I'm good, thanks." Olivia's eyes widened in surprise, and I smiled slightly at her reaction. "Now, if you don't mind." I turned to leave, but Olivia grabbed my wrist tightly. She was sneering at me, and it pissed me off. "Let me go," I demanded, but she only gripped harder. "Fine, You want the truth. I want to fight you again, one-on-one right now. Dare to take the challenge. A flicker of fire ignited behind her eyes. She was serious. Okay, fine, I said, just to get her to shut up. I dismissed myself from the spar and walked closer to Olivia.
Let's go then.
Perfect. Olivia suddenly beamed again and turned to start walking off. That girl's mood swings were impossible to keep up with, even if by some miracle you did get along with her. How was she already in a good mood again? Did she know how insufferable everyone found her? I praised the goddess as we walked in silence. To be honest, I was expecting a barrage of angry curses, not only at the situation I was in, but also at Simon. He was really going to go and leave me here. I was angered, but also hurt. Didn't he consider my pain? Maybe fighting Olivia would allow me to get these feelings out. That, and I'd get to kick her ass. Olivia stayed oddly quiet, but I was grateful. I watched as Olivia switched directions and headed toward the grove that Simon and I trained in. She still didn't say a word and simply expected me to follow her. She turned back and smiled at me. Okay, something was definitely up.
I went on high alert, but continued to follow Olivia, wondering what she was doing. Adding the temptation of Simon, this time, though, was more clever than I expected, but it didn't work. Not entirely. We were just entering the grove when, before I could react, Olivia spun around. Alice, you should pay for my mom's death, she shouted. It was then that I noticed that more shifters appeared behind her. They were apparently in ambush here, waiting for Olivia to bring me over. Holy shit, they wanted to kill me. I let my mutation happen, and just as I was about to fight, William rushed in. He seemed to be breathing hard, as if he had run the entire way here. For once, I avoided his eye. I didn't want to remember the last thing we had talked about, especially in front of Olivia. William, what are you doing here? Olivia asked loudly, sounding extremely irritated. This was definitely not part of her plan. I can't let you hurt Alice. He was still panting, but he stepped forward and planted his feet strongly, as if taking a literal stand against her. The Queen's death has nothing to do with Alice. She is also a victim. You and I both heard her. William shouted loudly. Nothing to do with Alice, huh? Olivia sneered, William. You don't understand. That's my mom, not any other person. When I was so young, she left me just because that damn lab wanted to get this ugly bitch. Do you think she's a victim? Yeah. What about me? Yeah, she shouted. I cried every night because I lost my mom who loved me. My dad was always busy. My brother was an idiot. I only had my mom, but this damn bitch ruined everything. Despite her harsh words, I could hear the pain in her tone. It almost made me feel sorry for her. Almost. She should die. Olivia continued, why was it not her who died? Yeah, from the moment she was born, she should have disappeared. She took a step forward and surrounded me and William with the other wolves. All hurt was washed from her voice, and it transformed into pure anger and hatred. Now I'm just getting things back on track. Olivia, calm down. We haven't figured it out. Perhaps we should tell James. He has a right to know too. I could tell William was trying to stall for time. As I have said, James is an idiot who only cares about his own pleasures, and you are the same to some extent. I won't tell anyone. I'll avenge my mom myself, she smirked. I was curious to see what Simon's face would be when he returned and found Alice dead near his residence. Our great teacher could do with learning a lesson or two himself. Olivia, please, William pleaded, but it was no use. Y'all are really starting to get on my nerves, she practically screeched. Everything all of a sudden is Alice this and Alice that. Like she's so cool. She's not. And just because you say you are Alice's mate doesn't mean you have to kiss her. Olivia shifted in front of us and attacked. William also shifted to resist her attacks. They fought fiercely together. The remaining shifters came towards me. I recognized them as Olivia's most loyal suitors.
If Olivia ordered them to tear me to shreds, they would definitely not relent, even if they will be punished by the Alpha King. Of course, I wasn't sure if the Alpha King would even punish his favorite daughter for causing my death. I couldn't help thinking about it. My hypothetical death? Simon's face flashed before my eyes. He was leaving. I couldn't let him leave the palace. I haven't had a chance to try to convince him to stay with me. My heart was beating violently, and I took an aggressive stance, ready to attack first. Just as the first hit was piercing the eye of a roaring wolf, I caught something out of the corner of my eye.
I glanced closer in the direction of the walls and realized that they weren't there.
The wall had a gap missing from it, and in that gap stood the mutated rogues, at least half a dozen. I quickly shrunk behind the tree and watched in fascination as they surrounded Olivia and William. They weren't attacking, though. There was a small sound coming from them, and it almost sounded like my name. Alice. This part has ended. Thank you for listening. If you would like to continue listening to the next part, please let me know by leaving a comment.